The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Elite Fashion House, one of New York's most exclusive boutiques on Fifth Avenue. Crystal chandeliers cast elegant shadows across marble floors, while designer gowns hung like works of art along pristine white walls. This wasn't just any clothing store. It was a place where movie stars, politicians' wives, and business moguls came to find their perfect outfits. Rebecca Martinez had been working here for 4 years, climbing her way up from sales associate to store manager. She took enormous pride in maintaining the boutique's reputation. Every morning she would walk through the store, adjusting hangers, polishing glass displays, and making sure everything looked absolutely perfect. To Rebecca, this job wasn't just about selling clothes. It was about preserving a certain standard, a certain image that attracted only the most sophisticated customers. The boutique had a long waiting list of people wanting to shop there. Appointments were booked months in advance, and walk-ins were rarely welcome unless they were already known clients. Rebecca had developed what she called her customer radar, the ability to spot within seconds whether someone belonged in their exclusive space or not. She would look at shoes, handbags, jewelry, even the way people carried themselves. In her mind, she was protecting the store's atmosphere and ensuring that serious shoppers weren't disturbed by what she considered window browsers. Thursday afternoon started like any other. The store was moderately busy with 3 regular clients, browsing the new autumn collection. Mrs. Henderson, a real estate mogul's wife, was trying on evening gowns in the private fitting room. A young tech entrepreneur was selecting business suits with her personal stylist. Everything was running smoothly, exactly how Rebecca liked it. Around 2:30, Rebecca noticed a woman enter the store alone. She was tall, elegant, wearing a simple but well-tailored navy blazer and dark jeans. Her hair was styled naturally, and she carried a modest leather handbag. What immediately caught Rebecca's attention wasn't what the woman was wearing, but rather what she wasn't wearing. No obvious designer logos, no flashy jewelry, no clear signs of wealth that Rebecca had trained herself to recognize. The woman moved gracefully through the store, stopping to examine various pieces with genuine interest. She spent several minutes looking at a stunning emerald green evening dress, carefully checking the fabric quality and construction details. Rebecca watched from behind the main counter, whispering to her assistant Jennifer about their situation. "Look at her," Rebecca murmured, nodding toward the woman. "She's been touching everything for 10 minutes but hasn't asked about prices once. You know what that usually means." Jennifer, new to the luxury retail world, looked confused. "Maybe she's just taking her time deciding?" Rebecca shook her head knowingly. "Trust me, I've been doing this long enough. Real customers don't hesitate when they see something they want. They ask about availability, sizes, prices immediately. She's probably just here to take photos for social media or something." The woman continued browsing, now examining a beautiful black cocktail dress with intricate beadwork. She held it up against herself, looking in the nearby mirror with a slight smile. Rebecca's suspicion grew stronger. In her experience, genuine customers at this level usually came with appointments, personal stylists, or at least called ahead. They certainly didn't wander around alone, taking their time like they were in a regular department store. "I should probably go over there," Rebecca told Jennifer. "We need to be polite but clear about our policy." As Rebecca approached, she put on her professional smile, the one she used when she needed to handle delicate situations. The woman was now looking at price tags, which in Rebecca's mind confirmed her suspicions. Real wealthy customers rarely checked prices before asking about a piece. "Good afternoon," Rebecca said, her tone friendly but slightly formal. "Are you finding everything all right today?" The woman looked up with warm, intelligent eyes. "Yes, thank you. You have some beautiful pieces here. I'm particularly interested in this dress. The craftsmanship is exceptional." Rebecca nodded politely, but noticed the woman hadn't mentioned having an appointment or being a referred client. "Are you familiar with our designers? This particular piece is from our exclusive collection. It's quite special." "I can see that," the woman replied, examining the delicate beadwork more closely. "The attention to detail is remarkable. I'm looking for something for an upcoming event. This was the moment Rebecca usually asked new customers about their event, their budget, their style preferences. But something held her back. Maybe it was the woman's casual attire, or the fact that she'd arrived without the usual entourage that accompanied their typical clients. Instead, Rebecca found herself saying, "Well, this collection is really designed for very formal, high-profile events." The price point reflects that exclusivity. The woman's expression didn't change, but Rebecca noticed a slight pause before she responded. "I understand. Could you tell me more about the sizing and availability?" Rebecca felt a flutter of uncertainty. The woman's questions were perfectly reasonable, her manner polite and sophisticated. But her training in reading customers was telling her something different. She'd seen too many people come in, ask detailed questions, even try things on, only to leave without purchasing anything. It wasted time and energy that could be better spent with serious buyers. "Before we go into details," Rebecca said, maintaining her professional tone, "I should mention that this particular dress is $3,800. Our collection starts at around $2,000 and goes up to $15,000 for our most exclusive pieces." She waited for the woman's reaction, expecting to see surprise, hesitation, or the slight backing away that usually happened when people realized they were out of their price range. Instead, the woman simply nodded. "I see. That's within what I expected for this quality. Could we discuss the sizing?" Rebecca felt caught off guard. The woman's response was exactly what she'd expect from a serious buyer, but something still felt off to her. Maybe it was her years in retail, or maybe it was her own preconceptions, but she couldn't shake the feeling that this situation would end in disappointment. "Of course," Rebecca said, though her enthusiasm was noticeably restrained. "What size would you typically wear?" As they discussed sizing and styling options, Rebecca found herself going through the motions rather than providing the enthusiastic, personalized service that Elite Fashion House was known for. She answered questions accurately, but without the warmth and excitement she usually showed when helping clients envision their perfect outfit. Other customers in the store began to notice the interaction. Mrs. Henderson emerged from her fitting room and observed the conversation with interest. The tech entrepreneur paused her own shopping to listen. There was something in Rebecca's tone, professional but distinctly cool, that seemed unusual for the typically warm atmosphere of the boutique. The woman continued asking thoughtful questions about the dress, about care instructions, about whether alterations could be made. Each question demonstrated knowledge and genuine interest, yet Rebecca found herself becoming more skeptical rather than more helpful. She'd built her career on quick judgments and reading people, and she wasn't ready to abandon that approach now. What Rebecca didn't realize was that her behavior was becoming increasingly obvious to everyone in the store except herself. Her responses grew shorter, her smile more forced, and her body language more closed off. The woman she was helping maintained her grace and patience, but the other customers were beginning to feel uncomfortable, witnessing what seemed like preferential treatment in reverse. The stage was being set for something that would change everything. For Rebecca, for the boutique, and for everyone involved. But in that moment she was too focused on her assumptions to see what was really happening right in front of her. The conversation between Rebecca and the elegant woman continued, but the atmosphere in the boutique was starting to shift. What had begun as a normal shopping interaction was slowly becoming something else entirely. Rebecca's doubts were growing, stronger by the minute, and her professional mask was beginning to slip. "I'd like to try this dress on if possible," the woman said, holding up the emerald green evening gown she'd been admiring. Her voice remained calm and pleasant, showing no signs of the tension that was building around them. Rebecca hesitated for a moment longer than she should have. In any normal situation, she would have immediately escorted a potential customer to the fitting rooms. But today felt different. Today, her instincts were telling her to be more careful. "Well," Rebecca said slowly, "our fitting rooms are typically reserved for clients who are ready to make a purchase decision. We've had issues in the past with people using our facilities for other purposes." The woman's eyebrows raised slightly. "Other purposes?" Rebecca felt heat rising in her cheeks but pressed forward. Some people come in just to try on expensive clothes for photos, or to see how they look in designer pieces they have no intention of buying. It wastes our time and potentially damages the merchandise. Uncomfortable silence fell over the nearby area. Mrs. Henderson, who had been browsing quietly, stopped what she was doing and turned to watch the interaction more closely. The tech entrepreneur and her stylist exchanged glances, clearly sensing something was wrong. The woman maintained her composure beautifully. "I understand your concern, but I'm genuinely interested in purchasing something today. Would it help if I provided a credit card as a good faith gesture?" Most managers would have immediately apologized and offered assistance at this point. But Rebecca had gone too far down this path to turn back easily. Her pride was now involved, and she felt like she needed to justify her suspicions. "It's not just about payment," Rebecca continued, her voice getting slightly louder. "It's about understanding our clientele and maintaining the right atmosphere for our regular customers. This boutique has a very specific reputation to uphold." The woman's expression changed subtly. The warmth in her eyes cooled just a degree, though her voice remained steady. "And what exactly does that mean?" Rebecca realized she was walking into dangerous territory, but she felt trapped by her own assumptions. She looked around the store, noticing that other customers were now openly watching their conversation. Instead of taking this as a warning sign, she interpreted it as validation that she was protecting the store's image. "What I mean is," Rebecca said, trying to sound reasonable while her voice carried a condescending tone, "our typical customers arrive by appointment, often with stylists or personal assistants. They usually have established relationships with luxury brands and understand how these environments work. They don't need to browse around quite so extensively." The insult was subtle but unmistakable. Rebecca was essentially saying that the woman didn't belong there, didn't understand how to shop at this level, wasn't part of their usual crowd. The message was clear, even though the words were carefully chosen. Jennifer, Rebecca's young assistant, looked mortified. She'd been watching the interaction unfold and couldn't believe how her boss was treating a potential customer. This wasn't the professional, welcoming service she'd been trained to provide. "Rebecca," Jennifer whispered, trying to get her manager's attention. "Maybe we should just let her try on the dress." But Rebecca was beyond listening to reason. She felt like she was in the middle of proving a point, and backing down now would make her look foolish. The woman's calm responses were actually making things worse. Rebecca interpreted the lack of anger or defensiveness as confirmation that she was right to be suspicious. "Look," Rebecca said, her professional facade finally cracking completely. "I'm going to be direct with you. This store caters to a very exclusive clientele. Our dresses are featured at galas, premieres, and high society events. Our customers are public figures, business leaders, people who are photographed wearing our designs. I'm not sure this is the right fit for what you're looking for." The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Everyone in the boutique stopped what they were doing. Mrs. Henderson gasped audibly. The tech entrepreneur pulled out her phone, sensing that something significant was happening. Even customers who had just entered the store could feel the tension. The woman's composure finally showed the first crack. Her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, and when she spoke, her voice carried a new edge. "Are you refusing to serve me?" Rebecca felt a moment of panic. When the question was asked so directly, she realized how her behavior would look to anyone, reviewing the situation later. But she was too far committed to her course of action to change now. "I'm suggesting that you might be more comfortable shopping somewhere that better matches your needs and budget," Rebecca said, the words coming out more harshly than she'd intended. That was the moment everything changed. Several customers began recording with their phones, sensing they were witnessing something that would have consequences. The woman's expression shifted from surprised disappointment to something much more serious. "I see," she said quietly. "And you're making this judgment based on what exactly?" Rebecca felt cornered and defensive. "Based on my professional experience and my responsibility to maintain the standards of this establishment." The woman nodded slowly, as if processing not just the words but the full implications of what was happening. She looked around the store, noting the other customers who were now openly staring and recording. She seemed to be making a decision about how to handle the situation. "I think," she said carefully, "there might be some misunderstanding here. Perhaps I should speak with the owner or corporate management." This suggestion made Rebecca even more defensive. The idea that this woman might complain about her service felt like an attack on her professional judgment and her authority in the store. "The owner trusts my judgment completely," Rebecca said, her voice now loud enough for everyone in the boutique to hear clearly. "I've been managing this store successfully for years, and part of my job is knowing who belongs here and who doesn't. I'm not being unreasonable, I'm being realistic." The woman stared at Rebecca for a long moment, and something in her expression suggested she was seeing the situation with perfect clarity. When she spoke again, her voice was calm, but carried an unmistakable authority. "I think you're making a very serious mistake." Rebecca felt a chill run down her spine, but her pride wouldn't let her back down. "The only mistake would be wasting both our time when we both know how this is going to end." At this point, Mrs. Henderson approached the counter. "Excuse me," she said to Rebecca, "but I think you should know who you're talking to." Rebecca shot her a sharp look. "Mrs. Henderson, I appreciate your concern, but I can handle this situation." But Mrs. Henderson wasn't backing down. She looked directly at the woman who had been so rudely treated and said, "I am so sorry about this. This is absolutely not how customers should be treated anywhere, let alone in a place like this." Other customers began murmuring agreement. The atmosphere in the store had completely changed from elegant and serene to tense and uncomfortable. Rebecca realized she had created a scene, but she felt too committed to her position to apologize or change course. The woman gathered her dignity around her like armor and prepared to leave. But before she did, she looked directly at Rebecca and said something that would haunt the store manager for weeks to come. "You have no idea what you've just done." The woman walked toward the exit of Elite Fashion House with her head held high, but Rebecca could see the hurt in her eyes despite her dignified composure. As the door closed behind her, the boutique fell into an uncomfortable silence. The other customers stood frozen, as if they'd just witnessed a car accident and weren't sure what to do next. Mrs. Henderson was the first to break the silence. She walked straight up to Rebecca with a look of complete disbelief on her face. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" she demanded, her voice shaking with anger. Rebecca felt defensive but tried to maintain her authority. "I handled a difficult situation professionally. That woman was clearly not a serious customer, and I protected the store's reputation." "Protected the reputation?" Mrs. Henderson's voice rose an octave. "You just humiliated Michelle Obama in front of half a dozen witnesses." The words hit Rebecca like a physical blow. For a moment, she couldn't process what she'd heard. "What did you say?" "That woman you just threw out of here was Michelle Obama, the former First Lady of the United States. I recognized her the moment she walked in, but I thought you knew who she was." Rebecca felt the blood drain from her face. She looked around the store and saw the expressions of the other customers: shock, disappointment, and in some cases, barely contained anger. The tech entrepreneur was still holding her phone, and Rebecca realized with growing horror that the entire incident had probably been recorded. "That's impossible," Rebecca whispered. But even as she said it, she knew it was true. The woman's poise, her intelligence, the way she'd handled the situation with such grace. It all made perfect sense now. Jennifer, her young assistant, looked like she might be sick. "Oh my God, Rebecca, what have we done?" The full weight of the situation began to crash down on Rebecca. She had just publicly humiliated one of the most respected women in America. She had questioned Michelle Obama's right to shop in an exclusive boutique. She had essentially told a former First Lady that she didn't belong there. Mrs. Henderson wasn't finished. "That woman has appeared on the cover of Vogue multiple times. She's worn designs by every major fashion house in the world. She's been dressed by the most famous stylists on the planet. And you thought she didn't understand luxury fashion?" Rebecca sank into the chair behind the counter, her legs suddenly too weak to support her. "I didn't recognize her. She wasn't. She didn't look like." "Like what?" The tech entrepreneur interrupted, finally speaking up, like she was wearing a crown. like she had a security detail. She was dressed perfectly appropriately for shopping. You made assumptions based on what exactly? Rebecca couldn't answer because she didn't want to face the truth about her assumptions. She had judged Michelle Obama based on some internal checklist that had nothing to do with the woman's actual qualifications to shop there. Within minutes, Rebecca's phone started buzzing. Then, the store's landline began ringing. Social media. Notifications were pinging constantly on her personal phone. The videos taken by customers were already being shared, and the story was spreading faster than wildfire. The first call was from a local news reporter who had somehow gotten wind of the story. Is it true that Michelle Obama was asked to leave your boutique today? Rebecca hung up without answering, but the phone immediately rang again. This time it was another reporter, then another. Her hands were shaking as she turned off the ringer, but she could see the voicemails piling up. Jennifer was reading social media posts out loud, her voice getting higher with each one. Oh no, oh no, oh no. Rebecca, this is everywhere. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, everyone's talking about it. People are posting the videos and they're going viral. Rebecca grabbed Jennifer's phone and started scrolling through the posts. The story was being shared thousands of times per minute. People were tagging news outlets, celebrities, civil rights organizations. The hashtags were already trending nationwide. One video had been viewed over 1 million times in just 2 hours. Rebecca watched herself on the screen, saw her own face, twisted with condescension as she spoke to Michelle Obama. She could hear her own voice saying things that sounded even worse when played back than they had in the moment. The comments under the videos were brutal. People were calling her racist, elitist, ignorant. They were demanding she be fired. They were organizing boycotts of the boutique. Some were even posting her personal information, which terrified her. Mrs. Henderson was gathering her things to leave. I've been shopping here for 8 years, she told Rebecca coldly. I've spent over $50,000 in this store, but I will never set foot in here again. What you did today was disgusting. The tech entrepreneur and her stylist left without buying anything, shaking their heads in disgust. Within an hour, Rebecca was alone in the boutique with Jennifer, surrounded by the expensive clothes that suddenly felt like they were mocking her. The corporate office called at 4:30. Rebecca's district manager, Patricia, was barely controlling her fury. Rebecca, what in God's name happened today? My phone hasn't stopped ringing. The CEO is getting calls from board members. We have reporters trying to get statements. This is a complete disaster. Rebecca tried to explain, but every word she said made things sound worse. How could she explain that she hadn't recognized one of the most famous women in the world? How could she justify treating any customer the way she had treated Michelle Obama? Pack up your office, Patricia said finally. You're suspended pending a full investigation. Don't talk to any reporters, don't post anything on social media. Just go home and wait for HR to contact you. By evening, the story had made national news. Every major network was covering it. Political commentators were discussing it as an example of ongoing discrimination. Social justice advocates were using it to highlight broader issues about how Black customers are treated in retail establishments. Rebecca sat in her apartment, watching herself become the villain in a story that was much bigger than just one bad day at work. She saw Michelle Obama's response to reporters, where she spoke with her characteristic grace about the importance of treating all people with dignity and respect. Even after being humiliated, the former First Lady was using the situation to promote positive change rather than seeking revenge. The boutique's corporate headquarters issued a public apology, but it felt hollow after what had happened. They announced that they were reviewing their customer service policies and would be implementing sensitivity training for all employees. They promised to do better, but the damage was already done. Rebecca's personal social media accounts were flooded with angry messages. Her friends and family were calling, some supportive but many expressing disappointment and shame. Her own mother called to say she was embarrassed by her daughter's behavior. The worst part was watching the video clips over and over again, seeing herself through other people's eyes. She could see the exact moment when her professionalism had given way to prejudice. She could see Michelle Obama's face as the realization dawned that she was being discriminated against. She could see the other customers' shock and disgust. Rebecca realized that in trying to protect what she thought was the store's reputation, she had destroyed it completely. In trying to maintain exclusivity, she had revealed the ugly side of elitism. In thinking she was doing her job well, she had probably ended her career forever. The story was no longer just about one interaction in one boutique. It had become a national conversation about respect, dignity, and the assumptions people make about others based on appearance. And Rebecca Martinez had become the face of everything that was wrong with those assumptions. The next morning, Rebecca woke up hoping the whole thing had been a terrible nightmare. But as soon as she checked her phone, reality came crashing back. Overnight, the story had exploded even further. What started as a local incident had become international news. She had hundreds of missed calls, thousands of social media notifications, and her name was trending worldwide. Rebecca pulled up the news on her laptop with trembling hands. CNN was running the story as their lead piece. The headline read, "Former First Lady Discriminated Against at Luxury Boutique." BBC had picked it up too, along with news outlets in France, Germany, and Japan. She had become globally famous for all the wrong reasons. The worst part was seeing the security footage that someone had leaked to the media. The boutique's cameras had captured everything from multiple angles. Rebecca watched herself in horror, seeing body language and facial expressions she hadn't even realized she was making. The footage made her behavior look even worse than the cell phone videos because it showed the complete interaction from start to finish. Her phone rang constantly, but she had stopped answering. Reporters were calling from everywhere. Local stations, national networks, international outlets, online publications. They all wanted her side of the story, but what could she possibly say that would make any of this better? By noon, protesters had gathered outside Elite Fashion House. Rebecca watched the live news coverage from her apartment window, which had a distant view of Fifth Avenue. She could see the crowd growing larger by the hour. People carried signs, reading "Respect for all customers" and "No more discrimination." Some were chanting, others were giving interviews to reporters. The boutique had been forced to close temporarily. Corporate security had been called in after threats were made against the store. Rebecca felt sick knowing that her actions had put other people's jobs at risk. Jennifer, her young assistant, had called that morning crying. The poor girl was getting harassed online just for being associated with the incident. Rebecca's landlord called around 2 in the afternoon. "Rebecca, I need to talk to you about your lease," he said uncomfortably. "I've got reporters camping outside the building, disturbing other tenants. People are angry about what happened. I think it might be better if you found somewhere else to stay for a while." Even her neighbors were turning against her. Mrs. Chen from down the hall, who had always been friendly, now wouldn't make eye contact in the elevator. The doorman looked at her with disappointment and shame. She felt like she was carrying a disease that everyone could see. Her sister called from California, where the story had made the evening news there too. "Rebecca, what were you thinking? Mom is devastated. She can't even go to church because people keep asking her about it. You need to do something to fix this." But what could she do? How do you apologize for something that had been broadcast to millions of people? How do you take back words that had already been analyzed and discussed on every news program in the country? The corporate investigation was swift and thorough. Rebecca received a call from the head of human resources at 3 o'clock. "Rebecca, after reviewing all available evidence, including security footage, witness statements, and social media documentation, we've made our decision. Your employment with Elite Fashion House is terminated immediately, effective today." Rebecca had expected this, but hearing it officially still felt like a punch to the stomach. "I understand," she whispered. Furthermore, the HR director continued, "Due to the nature of this incident and its impact on our brand reputation, we will not be providing any positive references for future employment. I'm sorry, Rebecca, but this situation has consequences that extend far beyond just losing your job." After hanging up, Rebecca sat in her apartment staring at the wall. She had built her entire career in luxury retail over the past 8 years. She had worked her way up from sales associate to manager, earning certifications in fashion merchandise and customer service. All of that was gone now. Who would hire her after this? Her face was too recognizable, her name too associated with discrimination. The financial impact was starting to hit too. Without her manager's salary, she couldn't afford her expensive Manhattan apartment. Her savings wouldn't last long in a city where everything cost twice as much as anywhere else. She had car payments, student loans, credit card debt from maintaining the lifestyle that went with her former position. By evening, the story had evolved beyond just the initial incident. Investigative reporters had dug deeper, finding other complaints about Elite Fashion House's treatment of customers. 3 other people had come forward with similar stories about feeling unwelcome or discriminated against at the boutique. The pattern made Rebecca's behavior look even worse because it suggested this wasn't just one mistake, but part of a bigger problem. Civil rights organizations were now involved. The National Association for the Advancement of Colored People had issued a statement calling for industry-wide changes in how luxury retailers train their staff. They were using Rebecca's incident as an example of unconscious bias and systemic discrimination in high-end retail. Legal experts on television were discussing whether Michelle Obama could sue the boutique for discrimination. Most agreed that, while she probably wouldn't pursue legal action, the incident was clear evidence of the kind of treatment that happens to people of color in upscale establishments across the country. Rebecca's college friends started distancing themselves from her on social media. Some unfriended her entirely, while others posted messages about being disappointed and embarrassed by her actions. Her professional network on LinkedIn began shrinking as connections removed her from their contacts. The boutique's other employees were suffering too. Several had been harassed online just for working at the same store. Sales had dropped to 0 since the incident, and corporate was considering whether to close the location permanently. 23 people might lose their jobs because of what Rebecca had done. Celebrity customers who had shopped at Elite Fashion House for years were publicly cutting ties with the brand. A famous actress posted on Instagram about canceling her account and finding new places to shop. A politician's wife made a statement about supporting businesses that treat all customers equally. The boutique was losing not just regular customers, but high-profile clients whose purchases and endorsements had been crucial to their success. Rebecca tried to draft an apology letter multiple times, but nothing felt adequate. How do you apologize to Michelle Obama for treating her like she didn't belong in an upscale store? How do you apologize to an entire community for reinforcing negative stereotypes? How do you apologize to your coworkers for destroying their workplace? Late that night, alone in her apartment with the blinds closed and the lights off, Rebecca finally understood the full scope of what she had done. This wasn't just about losing her job or facing public criticism. She had contributed to a problem that was much bigger than herself. She had hurt someone who had always stood for dignity and respect. She had become an example of the very attitudes that society was trying to overcome. The woman she had dismissed and humiliated was someone who had dedicated her life to education, healthy living, and supporting military families. Michelle Obama had used her platform as First Lady to promote positive causes and inspire young people around the world. And Rebecca had treated her like she was unworthy of basic customer service. As she finally drifted off to sleep, Rebecca knew that tomorrow would bring more consequences, more shame, and more regret. But she also knew that this was only the beginning of how this incident would change everything, not just for her, but for conversations about respect and equality everywhere. 2 weeks after the incident that changed everything, Rebecca was sitting in her nearly empty apartment surrounded by boxes. She had been forced to move out of her expensive Manhattan place and was heading back to her hometown in Ohio to stay with her parents while she figured out her next steps. The glamorous life she had built in New York was completely over. That morning, something unexpected happened. Her phone rang with a call from an unknown number, but this time it wasn't a reporter or someone calling to yell at her. It was someone from Michelle Obama's office. "Ms. Martinez," the voice said professionally. "Mrs. Obama would like to extend an invitation for you to attend a public discussion she's hosting tomorrow at the Community Education Center in Harlem. The topic is retail discrimination and unconscious bias. She specifically requested that you be given the opportunity to attend. Rebecca's heart nearly stopped. I don't understand. Why would she want me there? Mrs. Obama believes in education and growth rather than just punishment. She thinks this situation can become a learning opportunity for everyone involved, including you. The choice is yours, but she hopes you'll consider coming. After hanging up, Rebecca sat in stunned silence. Michelle Obama, the woman she had humiliated and disrespected, was offering her a chance to be part of the solution instead of just remaining the problem. It would have been so easy for the former First Lady to let Rebecca disappear in shame. But instead, she was extending grace and an opportunity for redemption. The next day, Rebecca took the subway to Harlem for the first time in her 4 years of living in New York. She had always stayed in Manhattan in her bubble of expensive stores and exclusive restaurants. As she walked through the community center, she realized how limited her perspective had been. The room was packed with people from all walks of life: retail workers, community leaders, civil rights advocates, students, and ordinary citizens who had experienced discrimination in stores. Rebecca sat in the back, hoping to remain invisible, but she could feel people recognizing her and whispering. When Michelle Obama entered the room, the atmosphere immediately changed. She carried herself with the same grace and dignity that Rebecca remembered from that terrible day in the boutique, but now Rebecca could see it for what it really was: the bearing of someone who had faced adversity with strength and turned challenges into opportunities for positive change. "Good afternoon, everyone," Michelle Obama began, her voice warm and commanding attention. "We're here today because of an incident that many of you have heard about. But we're not here to shame anyone or point fingers. We're here to talk about how we can do better as a society." She spoke about her own experiences with discrimination, not just the recent incident but throughout her life. She talked about being followed in stores, having her intelligence questioned, being made to feel unwelcome in spaces where she had every right to be. Rebecca listened with growing horror as she realized she had been part of a pattern that had followed this accomplished woman for decades. "The young woman who treated me poorly at that boutique isn't evil," Michelle Obama continued, and Rebecca felt tears starting to form. "She's a product of a system that teaches us to make quick judgments about people based on how they look or what we think we know about them. But systems can be changed, and people can grow." Then, to Rebecca's complete shock, Michelle Obama looked directly at her in the audience. "Rebecca Martinez is here with us today, and I want to thank her for having the courage to come. It would have been easier to hide, but she's here because she's ready to learn and do better." Rebecca felt every eye in the room turn to her. Some faces showed anger, others curiosity, but many showed something she hadn't expected: understanding. A woman near her reached over and squeezed her hand in support. Michelle Obama continued, "I asked Rebecca to come today because I believe in second chances and the power of education. The question isn't whether she made a mistake. She did. The question is what we all do next to make sure these mistakes happen less often." During the discussion that followed, Rebecca listened to story after story from people who had been treated poorly while shopping, dining, or just trying to live their lives. A young black man talked about being followed around electronics stores. An elderly Latina woman shared how she was ignored by salespeople at department stores. A family described being asked to leave a restaurant because other customers complained about their children's behavior, even though white families with louder children weren't bothered. Each story was like a mirror showing Rebecca how her behavior fit into a much larger pattern of discrimination that happened every day across the country. She began to understand that what felt like protecting the boutique's image was actually part of a system that made people feel unwelcome and unwanted based on assumptions and prejudices. When the formal discussion ended, several attendees approached Rebecca. She expected anger, but instead found people willing to share their experiences and help her understand how to do better. A retail worker from Brooklyn explained how unconscious bias training had changed her approach to customers. A college student talked about the difference between intent and impact, how even if Rebecca hadn't meant to discriminate, the impact on Michelle Obama was still real and harmful. Most surprisingly, Michelle Obama herself approached Rebecca as People were leaving. "How are you doing?" she asked with genuine concern. Rebecca broke down crying. "I'm so sorry. I don't even know how to begin to apologize for what I did to you. You didn't deserve any of that treatment." "Apology accepted," Michelle Obama said simply. "But more importantly, what are you going to do now? How are you going to use this experience to make things better?" They talked for 20 minutes. Michelle Obama shared resources for understanding unconscious bias, recommended books about retail, discrimination, and suggested ways Rebecca could contribute to positive change. She didn't lecture or scold. She educated and encouraged. "You have a choice now," Michelle Obama said as their conversation ended. "You can let this mistake define you forever, or you can use it as the starting point for becoming someone who helps solve these problems instead of contributing to them." Over the following months, Rebecca threw herself into learning and growing. She read extensively about discrimination and bias. She volunteered with organizations that provided job training for people from underserved communities. She took a job at a nonprofit that worked with retailers to improve their customer service practices and eliminate discriminatory treatment. The work paid much less than her old job, and she had to move back in with her parents for a year to get back on her feet financially. But for the first time in her life, she felt like she was doing something meaningful instead of just earning money. Rebecca started speaking at diversity training sessions for retail companies, sharing her story as an example of how unconscious bias can hurt both customers and businesses. It wasn't easy. She had to relive her mistake over and over again, facing criticism and judgment from people who heard her story. But she also met people who appreciated her honesty and her commitment to change. A year later, Rebecca received an unexpected email. It was from Michelle Obama's office with a photo from the community discussion and a note. "Thank you for proving that people can grow and change. Your work with retail diversity training is making a real difference. Keep going." Rebecca framed the photo and kept it on her desk as a reminder that mistakes don't have to be the end of the story. They can be the beginning of something better, if you're willing to do the hard work of learning, growing, and making amends. The boutique where it all started eventually reopened under new management, with completely revised policies and extensive staff training. They partnered with community organizations and became a model for inclusive customer service in luxury retail. Rebecca never got her old life back, but she built a better one based on understanding, empathy, and using her experience to help others avoid the same mistakes she had made.